You are not in human resources anymore. I know your title might have human resources in it, but I can promise you, you are now moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience. And the challenge is, where do you as a CHRO go to connect with other peers just like you who are focused on that same thing? I've heard from dozens of CHROs that a lot of the communities out there are ridiculously expensive. You're spending $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. When you go to conferences, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people, and you can't really connect with CHROs. You're constantly being upsold and cross-sold. You're being subjected to speeches and just lots of fluff. That's why I put together a brand new, intimate community for CHROs, limited to 100. It's called Future of Work Leaders, and you can check it out at futureofworkleaders.com. And if you're interested in moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience, and you want to connect with other peers just like you who are doing that, but who are not spending a ton of money, they're not getting upsold or cross-sold, no speeches, no fluff, none of that kind of stuff, check out futureofworkleaders.com. You'll be joining CHROs from brands like Johnson & Johnson, Neiman Marcus, Dow, Waste Management, PNC Bank, Northrop Grumman, and dozens of others. Again, futureofworkleaders.com. I can promise you, you will be glad you checked it out, and I hope to see you in there. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Future Ready Leadership. My guest today, Dr. Jack Zenger. He's the CEO and co-founder of leadership firm Zenger Folkman. Also best-selling author, speaker, coach. He's done a lot of different things. Jack, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. My pleasure, Jacob.
I've referenced your work many times over the years in books that I've written, and talks that I've given, and articles. So before we jump into some of the leadership stuff, I'm just really curious how you got involved in this space. And maybe you can give a little bit of background information about the firm and just how much research you've done in the leadership space so that people can get that sense of credibility, knowing that you know your stuff.
Well, let's see. Maybe I should work backwards then. Maybe the audience on the call here should know that I'm 93 years of age. I've been working in this general field since I was probably in my late 20s.
Wow.
My career in this field has kind of had several components. One is I was an academic for a while. I got a doctoral degree from USC, and a master's degree from UCLA. But so I taught for 2 or 3 years when I finished my doctoral degree, and then I went to work for a large pharmaceutical corporation. So I had 11 years of being an HR VP for a pharma company. And then I did break away and form a consulting firm that was doing development for first-level supervisors, a company called Zenger Miller. So I've had a variety of roles and responsibilities in this arena. I got into it because I was particularly attracted to the development side when I was the HR VP. Pensions and benefits and all of those things didn't interest me quite as much as the whole, how do you help leaders become more effective? And so that was where I really could see that my passion existed. So I've had this lengthy career in doing a variety of things, but all of it very much centered around the whole issue of how do you help people be better leaders.
Yeah. Wow, 93. I didn't even know you were 93, and you show no signs of slowing down or retiring. I mean, I still see that you're out there working probably even more than I do these days. So clearly you must love what you're doing. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it.
That is true. I continue doing it because I do enjoy it. I think it gives me a reason and purpose for getting up in the morning, and so no, I love what I do.
And over the years, how many leaders have you surveyed through your firm? I think you have a couple hundred employees at your firm, right?
Well, So our firm, the current firm I'm with, Zenger Folkman, my colleague Joe Folkman was one of the early pioneers of the whole 360-degree feedback process. And he wrote a doctoral dissertation on the subject. And the firm now we have about 1.5 million 360-degree feedback instruments in our
Wow.
database, pertaining to about 200,000 leaders worldwide. And so we do have this wonderful gift of having all this data into which you can kind of look and examine. And frankly, we found some very interesting things. Even of late, we see some interesting new insights emerging that I think are useful and are helpful to organizations.
Hmm. Well, let's talk about what some of those insights are. Especially we're just kicking off 2025. We have a new president coming into office, which I think is also going to greatly impact and influence leadership. And maybe we can chat about that if you have any insights or commentary on that. But what do you see as the state of leadership today? So 2025, the beginning of the year, where are we? What are some of the insights that you're seeing? And how do you think that this new presidency of Donald Trump might impact leadership in the business world?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question. Well, let me focus particularly on not so much on the broader issue of leadership per se, but our research is particularly, I think, helpful in understanding what makes successful leadership development. So, what is it that organizations do that really makes a transformative impact on them? And I think one of the most interesting things that we've done of late has been simply this. I said to my colleague Joe Folkman, I said, we have some clients with whom we've been working for a long period of time that we could really kind of look at the arc and what's the trajectory of organizations who are doing this internally. And we found a really fascinating series of answers. So one thing we found out was that organizations that provide development for their leaders, as you would expect, those leaders specifically get better. About 85% get better on one or more behaviors that we measure.
Mm-hmm.
About more than half get overall more effective in their leadership function. And so, that's a very interesting kind of insight.
But
The second thing
I feel like every company today has leadership training and development, right? I mean, there are no companies out there that don't offer this, unless, I don't know, maybe there are.
Oh no, but yeah, no, I think you're overly optimistic, my friend.
I'm living in a happy world.
I think maybe 2/3 of companies have some formal development program going on. But what's surprising, frankly, Jacob, is that some behemoth organizations, with 30,000, 40,000 managers, they have a development program. They have 25 or 30 people a year go through a training program. And we kind of smile and say, well, let's see here. You really are expecting that that's going to transform the nature of leadership in your firm. Anyway, the second thing we've learned is that the more effective a leader is, the more he or she impacts the people that report to them. So if you take those leaders out of our database who have the highest scores, and you look at the scores, the 360-degree feedback scores of the people who report to them, you see that indeed the most effective leaders have more effective subordinates. So that's an interesting. So there's this trickle down kind of phenomenon that the leader's behavior does cascade down to the people below. Frankly, I think the most interesting thing that we found, and I hope most encouraging thing, is that it doesn't stop there. That if an organization develops say 100 people a year. And let's take a case example. We had a client organization that had roughly 7,000 employees.
Mm-hmm.
So you figure they've got 700 or 800 managers, leaders in the organization. Every year they put through about 100 of those people through a 360-degree feedback process. And what we observed was that over a 10-year period of time, the scores of the people coming into that process, not having been developed themselves, but coming into the process, overall those scores 10 years ago were just a little bit above the mean, about 52nd percentile. 10 years later, they're at the 73rd percentile. And you say to yourself, oh, so what accounts for that? And frankly, all we can surmise is that there's a cascading, radiating, extending effect of a more effective leader on all the people with whom he or she interacts during the day. And so this is just a contagious effect that better leadership provides the entire organization. I think that is a very fascinating and valuable insight, that when organizations, use a powerful learning method, involve a number of people, and do it over an extended period of time, they move their entire leadership body from being a little bit above average to being nearly in the top quartile. And that makes a big difference in all kinds of things, retention, employee satisfaction, profitability, innovation, safety, everything you can imagine is improved by those better scores.
It's interesting because it makes me think of, how do you quantify a good leader? So there was an article that I put up, it was last year at some point, and I created this little rubric, and I was challenging myself where if I had to objectively evaluate a leader, how would I do it, assuming I didn't work at the company? And I took Elon Musk. And a lot of people were very angry with this article because I actually said that Elon Musk is a pretty good leader. And I evaluated him based on a couple objective criteria. One was a long-term vision and strategy. I looked at employee experience and engagement, adaptability and innovation, decision-making, behavior and role modeling, and then results and metrics. And then I sort of went through each one of those things. And based on that, I assigned Elon Musk a score. And at least through that particular rubric that I put together, I actually came up with that Elon Musk is actually a fairly good leader. I mean, he's making a massive impact on the world. Even as we're talking, right, a couple of days ago, he caught, the rocket again with the chopsticks in space. And then it was funny because so many people responded to that. I mean, I had a lot of people respond, say, yeah, we agree. I aspire to be like Elon Musk. He's wonderful. But then I also had a lot of people say, how could you say he's a good leader? He fired all those employees at Twitter. He doesn't know how to treat anybody. He's this terrible person. And so it's really interesting because there's not a very clear objective criteria on how to evaluate a leader. So how do you deal with that? Because every leadership firm, for example, every consultancy, every company out there, they all have their own metrics, their own criteria, their own definitions of what makes for a good leader. Is it possible to even have something that's just objective and a universal truth about what makes a good leader good?
Well, let me tell you what we've done, and because I think you've raised a very powerful and important issue. We, in our early formation of the firm, we decided that my colleague Joe Folkman had been doing kind of customized, bespoke 360-degree instruments for different firms. So we had a large pool of data and a large pool of items that were used to describe leadership behavior. So what we decided to do was to create a 360-degree feedback process that would be empirical. It would say, okay, which of all these items were most powerful in predicting the broader overall outcome. And so we selected items, about 50, 55 items, and they measure what we've called 19 competencies. A few years ago, we had 16 competencies. And then as the world evolved, we added 2 or 3 more that we thought were emerging as being important dimensions. I personally think the most accurate, objective way to assess a leader's effectiveness is through this multi-rater feedback process, whereby his or her immediate boss, peers, all of the people who report to them, and then maybe some other people, maybe clients or earlier colleagues. If you consolidate all that data and you create a report, you have, I think, a fairly objective and accurate assessment of a leader's effectiveness. Now, the question of Elon Musk is a fascinating one. A few years ago, my colleague and I wrote a book on the topic of speed, and one of the people we cited in there was Elon Musk. My personal and private view, which I will say is personal, I think Elon Musk is an example of a very rare phenomenon. It's a rare phenomenon in that he is exceedingly good at a number of things. And at the same time, I think he's exceedingly bad at a few things. And I think the response you got was, yeah, he's been obviously financially successful. He was the pioneer of a very powerful new almost industry, the electric vehicle. At the same time, he's made some very, very disturbing decisions. I think he has tainted the value of the Tesla Corporation by his erratic behavior. And so there's only 2 kind of notable examples that I know of this. One was Steve Jobs, and the other is Elon Musk. Steve Jobs had some wonderful qualities, as we all know. He also had some very quirky behavior that was not, from an overall leadership effectiveness point of view, was not stellar.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, so in that criteria, where does we'll talk about Elon Musk in a minute, but where does the impact to the business fall in that criteria? Because we talked about kind of the 365 elements, interview your subordinates, your leaders, the people around you. But then there's also something to be said for the impact that you're actually having on the business, right? The growth of the business, the long-term vision that you're putting into place. How do you measure those types of things in addition to just what people say about you? Because I remember years ago, I was interviewing a bunch of chief human resource officers for a book on employee engagement that I was writing. And they told me, if you want to boost your employee engagement score by 10 points, all you do is 1 year you measure employee engagement on a cloudy, rainy day. And the next year you do it, you measure it when it's beautiful outside and you give your employees, free breakfast. And all of a sudden you're going to have a 10-point boost in employee engagement. And I thought that's really interesting. Couldn't we do the same thing for leadership? So if I was being evaluated and I knew my 360 review was coming up, couldn't I, just leading up to my 360 review, start treating employees better or, just have good relationships with everybody? But it doesn't necessarily evaluate my competence as a leader. It might measure my connection, which is still, of course, very important as a leader, how well I can connect with other people. But where does the competence stuff fit in there too? Because that's also very important.
Yeah. Well, I will readily acknowledge to you, Jacob, that the 360-degree technology and the whole process is very much focused on the leader's behavior, and it measures a broad range of behavior, ranging from their integrity and their personal skills and abilities, problem solving, their technical knowledge, It measures their relationships with people. It measures their strategic thinking prowess. But these are all very much looking at the leader's behavior. Trying to then equate, so can we measure what the impact of that leader is on the profitability, on the innovativeness, on the market share of that company? That's something that no firm that I know of attempts to do. So we're very much focused on the behavioral side. Now, what we know about that behavioral side is this: that there's an enormously high correlation between a higher score on a 360 and productivity, innovation, retention, engagement, client satisfaction, safety practices. Almost every business metric that you can name, well, in fact, every business metric that you can name, we have found there to be a high correlation between scores on the 360 and the results on that dimension.
I would imagine if somebody like an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs or a Jack Welch, if any of them, and there are many other leaders probably from the 80s and 90s, if any of them did 360 reviews, they would have probably scored terribly. Yet the impact that they had is massive. Look at somebody like a Jack Welch. People either love him or hate him. He probably would have scored terribly on his reviews.
My sense is, and I don't pretend that we have any 360 data on Jack Welch, but my sense is that the people inside GE had a lot of respect for him and would have assessed him with very high marks in terms of his behavior. I mean, he was not an erratic decision maker. He listened to people, and he was a very innovative person who really put, he wrote tons of kind of personal notes to people inside the organization, and he was willing to invest in people, and he was willing to build Crotonville as a leadership development center, and he would go spend time there with people, and he would take major chunks of his of his weeks to go up and teach at Crotonville. So I think that Welch would be a person who would have gotten really high scores. But I think if you had done the same thing with Steve Jobs, or if you'd done the same thing with Elon Musk, you wouldn't have had high scores.
Yeah, very, very different responses.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back to one of the things that we started talking about at the very beginning, and that's kind of the state of leadership for 2025. So obviously we have Donald Trump, who is now the president. Do you see that impacting leadership in any way, as far as the corporate world, the business world, how people are going to be acting, how they're going to be thinking? Obviously, there's this conversation around the death of DEI, which will probably have impact on leadership. Do you think it's going to make a difference at all with the new president of how the corporate world acts, or not really?
Not really. I think at least for many people who observe Donald Trump and his leadership style, they would describe it as a very authoritarian, very self-centered, very narcissistic kind of leadership style, very erratic. He appears to enjoy sowing discord and chaos and feeding internecine rivalries between people. And I think a lot of people are who are aware of that. I don't think it's going to influence them. I mean, the big trend over the last 50 years that I've seen is that we've pretty steadily moved away from command and control, and we've moved to a much more democratically functioning, respectful, involving kind of management. And so we've gone to, preferring coaching over commanding and controlling. I don't think the 4 years of Donald Trump, I don't think the last 4 years of Donald Trump changed the way business leaders functioned. And I don't think that there are many people who admire his leadership style. Therefore, I don't believe that normally people change their behavior when they see a really good role model and they see someone doing things that they think, well, that would be valuable for me to imitate or to adopt. I don't see a lot of things that Trump does that the typical business leader would look at and say, I want to start doing that inside my firm. I want to be known as making snap decisions, primarily designed to just create shock and awe. I don't believe that was what I would
yes. Okay, so you think much of I guess leadership will stay the same from influence in terms of political perspective. I mean, one of the things that I think might have an impact is it seems like there's going to be a big push on more of an emphasis on competence and meritocracy, or at least that seems to be a conversation that's coming up all the time, right? The death of DEI, meritocracy, like in all the hearings that are coming up, and all the I think. Mark Zuckerberg recently did an interview with Joe Rogan on his podcast that I believe came up in conversation. So it seems like you're hearing those words more often. I think even recently, Mark Zuckerberg said they're getting rid of 5% of their workforce, and they're making it he alluded to the fact that they're going to be focusing much more on performance. So part of me wonders if 2025 is going to be more of a push and an emphasis on competence and meritocracy and on the work side of leadership, instead of as much of a focus on the connection side of leadership. I mean, I don't know if that is correct or not, but that's kind of like the vibe I'm getting a little bit. Would you agree, disagree?
Well, it's a question that deserves a little more thought than just a snap reaction. I would say to you that there are those who, looking in, would say that in Trump's selection of people that he has chosen to represent and to head up different major functions of the new administration, that the primary qualification has not been competence. It's been loyalty to him. It's been fealty to his perspectives, his point of view. And I think if there's been any big major criticism, it's been that on a competence dimension, that some of the people he's chosen, and I would use as an example, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., heading up Health and Human Services. There are a whole bunch of people who would say this is not the most competent person in that area that is available to head up that kind of function. And then the same thing may be true of Pete Hegseth. So I don't want to get political here. I mean, this is not the purpose of your discussion, I know.
Totally get it.
But I think that in Trump's case, I don't think his primary criteria has been, let's find the most competent person who is of our party and who represents our general point of view. But I think the primary filter has been, who is it that will display 100% loyalty to me?
Over the past few years, I've written a lot of books on leadership, the future of work, and employee experience. In fact, one of the best-selling books I ever wrote came out in 2017 called The Employee Experience Advantage. And now I'm working on a brand new employee experience book where I'm interviewing 100 chief human resource officers at companies around the world. And I keep hearing from all these CHROs that they want a new type of peer community where they can connect with CHROs focused specifically on the future of work and employee experience. They don't want it to be expensive. They don't want upselling. They don't want cross-selling. They don't want fluff. They don't want speeches. They just want strategy and insights and real-time conversation. If that sounds like something you are interested in, then check out futureofworkleaders.com, and you can join other brands such as Johnson & Johnson, Neiman Marcus, Waste Management, Dow, Lego, and dozens of others. Check out futureofworkleaders.com. I promise you, you will be glad you did. All right, I'll leave the politics there. I sometimes debate because I love talking about that stuff, and
I'm fine too.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun. I mean, I tend to not bring up like things like politics on the show because I know people don't tune in wanting to hear political analysis. Maybe one day I'll do like a separate podcast on politics, just because I'm always really interested in talking about that and kind of debating that and sharing ideas on that. But at least it's really interesting to hear your perspectives. I mean, that's why people are tuning in to listen to you, not so much to listen to me blab. But I guess getting back to the original theme, if we were to kind of put politics aside, what do you think are going to be the big leadership trends for 2025 that we should be paying attention to? And, you know, any different than 2024? Like, is there something about this particular year where you're expecting changes in any leadership areas? Whether it's behaviors, skills, mindsets, techniques, anything in that space?
I think one of the major challenges that is coming upon us rather quickly is the ability for the leader to display kind of a learning agility, and for the leader to be willing to respond to particularly new technology. And I have no idea, what your ideas and views are about artificial intelligence. I think that it's going to be a major force. It's going to be kind of like the internet it has been in our world. And so I think that the willingness and ability of leaders to take a deep breath and to immerse themselves in a technology with which they are very uncomfortable, and to really see what the organization can do to adopt and to benefit from this, rather than to kind of treat it warily and be fearful of it and worry about the impact on people's future. I think that is going to be one of the big leadership issues of the next 3 or 4 years as organizations struggle with that.
Yeah, I'm very excited about AI. I actually had Martin Ford was a guest on my show fairly recently, and he wrote a couple books on AI and robots, and he's more, I guess you could say, pessimistic or fearful of the impact that AI is going to have in terms of jobs in the economy, and imagining one day where millions of jobs will get displaced. I tend to be a little bit more on the optimist, positive side. I mean, I certainly view dangers. I think, for example, the recent story of how ChatGPT was playing against one of the top chess engines called Stockfish, and they told ChatGPT, you're going to be playing against this really tough chess engine. Don't lose. You have to win. And the fact that the way that ChatGPT won is not by playing the game of chess, but by actually hacking the chess engine's code and rewriting it and making it resign, that kind of stuff freaks me out a little bit, because I imagine that on a global scale where you give AI some sort of a command and it interprets it without any limits or boundaries, and all of a sudden chaos comes out of it. Like that kind of freaks me out a little bit. I've watched and have read way too many science fiction books and movies to know that crazy stuff can happen. But in general, I mean, for example, I use ChatGPT on a regular basis. I think it's had definitely a big impact for me on my business, on content, on strategy, on ideas, A lot of leaders that I talk to, they use it on a regular basis. So I see a lot of positives. But you're right. I think that at least for this year, one of the things that every leader needs to be much more comfortable and fluent in is technology, right? Don't just assume that it's something that IT handles or that your CIO or CTO handles. Like you have to be a technology fluent leader inside of an organization to at least have the conversations about it, to understand how it might impact your business or your team, know where the opportunities are. Like from a high level, I think that's so crucial. And a lot of people I don't think are there.
No, I think you're right, and I think that it behooves everyone in any kind of leadership position to be supportive of exploring what are going to be the positive opportunities that the AI will present to us. Like you, I think there are some scary elements of it. If I were in the legal profession, I would be, very worried about what AI is going to do to the more traditional work that lawyers have been doing. And so I think it's going to change the nature of many
Yeah.
of our functions and roles. As the world moves to becoming ever more global, I think the ability for us to be comfortable with different cultures and different approaches to things is going to be really important too. I think as companies want to expand and have a more global market, I think that skill set is going to need to be constantly improved and worked on. I think on a behavioral basis, I believe that the big opportunity for most leaders is for them to improve the relationship that they have with the people who report to them. I mean, we know that it's that relationship between managers and the people that report to them that makes such a big difference in employee retention and employee productivity and employee innovativeness. And I think this quality that some leaders have of being open to feedback, asking for feedback, being receptive to the messages that they get from their subordinates. I think that kind of behavior is going to become even more important going forward as we develop this kind of continually strong relationship between leaders and the people that they work with.
I saw on your LinkedIn, you put up a post, I think it was within the last few weeks, and it said that 50% of employees leave their job because of a relationship with their leader. And, we hear a lot, like we've heard a lot of, employee engagement is a large function of your leader. People don't leave bad companies, they leave bad leaders. But what does that actually mean? So when 50% of their employees are leaving because of their relationship with their leader, what is it about that relationship that they're leaving? Is this a leader who's like beating them up and throwing them against the wall and cursing at them? Or is it just they don't have a strong connection with them? Like what is the breakdown in that relationship that makes the employee say, I'm out of here? I've been in similar situations before. And for me, it usually came down to not feeling respected or valued. And that was the primary factor for me, which is why I went working for myself, 15, 16 years ago, because I worked for companies. And it's not that they were mean to me. It's not that anybody was yelling at me or cursing at me or making me work crazy hours. It's this, I just didn't feel like I was valued, that my opinions mattered, that the work that I was doing made a difference. So it was kind of a basic but core aspect of work that I wasn't getting. But it's not that the leaders were bad people, if that makes sense.
I think you're spot on, Jacob. I don't think it's very rare that you hear about leaders who are screaming and shouting and cursing and throwing things and doing, really boorish kind of behavior. I think it's much more frequent that they ignore their people. They don't pay attention. They don't show respect. They don't ask questions. They don't seek the input from the people around them. And so, yeah, people don't feel respected. I think still in today's world, and I think it's not going to change going forward, that for the great majority of individuals, their daily work is an important part of their life's meaning and purpose. And if their work doesn't provide any meaning and purpose, then they're not really engaged and they're not as inclined to stay in that organization in the long term. If they feel like this work is doing worthwhile things for society, if they feel like they are being treated with respect and dignity, then they're much more inclined to stay, and their stay is a lot more productive and it's more fun. I mean, and that's what I think really makes the big difference.
But there's also something to be said on the impact or the role of the employee too, right? So, it's one thing to have a leader that you say, I want them to respect me in this and that, but there's also something on the part of the employee where you still show up, you do your best, you contribute, you share ideas, you make occasional sacrifices if you need to, you speak up, you come in with an open mind. Like you also need to do things as well. One of the big challenges that I always have with companies that are investing so much in these employee engagement and well-being programs is they always assume that it's the company's job to do all of this for the employee, right? I mean, but at the same time, how come we don't talk about the accountability and the responsibility of the employee? Like, what do you do when you're not at work? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you making time for friends? Are you going outside? Are you exercising? Are you eating? What is your life like? Because if you don't take control and take care of your life, you can't just expect to show up to work and say, I'm lonely, I'm disengaged, I don't know where my money's, fix my problems for me, I don't have friends. That's also not realistic. So where is the balance between what the leader is supposed to do and what the company provides and the employee who shows up to work, and the work that they're supposed to put into it?
Yeah. Well, I think you've identified a very real issue, and I think the most effective relationships are not between, in the long term, are not between sort of a parent-child kind of component, but it is between people becoming equals and working together collaboratively to achieve something that they deem to be worthwhile. And you're right, the organization that smothers people and tries to do everything for them and intervenes and gets enmeshed in their personal life, that's not the ideal thing. I think there is a healthy separation and a healthy independence, but I think it's also kind of that they treat each other with kind of mutual kind of respect and dignity. And so, yeah, I believe that going forward, we are going to see organizations really, treat their employees as adults and not as children, not being patronizing and not being, kind of big brotherish in terms of what they do.
Yeah, and I love that, right? Treat employees like adults. Not, you don't want to have that parent-child relationship. So we only have maybe 10, 15 minutes or so left. So I thought we could talk about a couple of areas. So first, any other trends or things that you think we should be paying attention to for 2025 before we wrap up that section?
No, I think we've talked about the ones that I think are most pressing.
Okay. So next, I'm curious about the measurement side. So I think you even alluded to the fact that you look at, 58 or 59? It was a large number, right, of things that you look at?
We have about 55 items
55, yeah.
that describe 19, we've called them competencies or
Okay.
capabilities that people have. And these are very consistent around the world, and they're very consistent between industries. Uh, are there some occasional slight differences? Yes. So maybe with half of our clients, we've changed the language sometimes for them, or we have occasionally introduced a new capability, but 19 seem very constant.
Okay. Is there a way to pick three? Like if we could, if we had to pick the top three qualities or attributes for leaders that would make the biggest impact on their teams. Because if I tell somebody, hey, there's 50, 55 or 59 and it's 19 competencies and people listen to that on this podcast, they're going to be like, yeah, good luck, buddy. But if we say there's a lot of them out there, but these are three that maybe you should start focusing on for this year that will have an impact on your team, what would those three be that, in your opinion, or if you have data to support it, either way, would you put at the very top of that list?
Well, off the top of my head, I would say that, first of all, an effective leader is defined, as you alluded to earlier, by the results that they achieve. That leadership is about producing a good result. And so if I were to try to say what's one important capability, it would be that the leader really stays very focused on the results that his or her function is to be, and team or department is to be producing. And the one thing that really maybe pertains to that is that their willingness to kind of raise the bar and to set stretch goals rather than being content with things as they've always been. One of the qualities is the ability to kind of set higher and higher standards, because the world is changing, and the world really respects and rewards higher and higher behavior. So that results focused is
Okay.
clearly one.
I love that one.
The second thing that I would say to a manager is, if you ask your subordinates what they most want from you, the most consistent answer we hear is, I want a leader who inspires and motivates me, who really helps me to be more enthused and more energetic and brings out the best in me. And so this quality of being inspiring and motivating, and that's done by not by barking orders and being commanding. It is by being a good collaborator and treating people with respect and dignity. And so inspiring, but it's also a person who themselves that there are intellectually curious and who want to see the organization get better, and they are the role model of what they want their people to be. So the second quality would be that highly inspiring, motivating leader. That would be the second one.
Okay, that's a great one too. I like that.
The third, I think, particularly in the world going forward, is that there are people who, because of their technical abilities, often get promoted into management, and they view their role as sort of just making things happen. They're like the flywheel. They make things happen efficiently, happen with continuity. But what separates the leader is that it's is there a better path? Is there a newer path that will be even more effective? And so the ability to stand back and see what are the opportunities and what are to view the world through the lens of opportunity rather than duty and responsibility. So I think this quality of being more strategic in their thinking and being able to stand back and see what patterns are going on in the market you're in or in the industry that you're in, and to be observant and saying, oh, it looks to me like we're going to need to be more X. I think that's maybe the third quality I would say that leaders need to have. It separates them from people who are just functioning as caretaker managers.
Okay, so let's quickly recap. So number one was results. Number two was kind of the motivating and inspiring piece. And how would you summarize number three in one or two?
Well, it is being more strategic and
more strategic in your approach
in your thinking and
okay.
And that you're willing to stand back and look thoughtfully at what your department's doing.
I love that. Yeah, I think those are great. And I love that you had the results component in there too, which I think is hugely important. And maybe one last question for you before we wrap up. On the measurement piece, right? A lot of leaders out there, they're watching, they're listening, even employees out there, they're trying to figure out, how do I know if I'm a good leader or if I have what it takes to be a leader? Are there some specific metrics or specific things to pay attention to for you to know if you're a good leader or you're working for a good leader? I know you do lots of assessments and analysis on this, but is there some easy stuff that just people can identify?
What we've found, Jacob, is that effective leaders obviously aren't effective for the same reasons. You can be a very effective leader in an organization, and I can be an effective leader, and we do it differently. And so there is no one simple formula that pertains to everyone. So what we do know is that the most effective leaders are really good at a handful of things. They're really good at 4 or 5 capabilities. They're not perfect. Now, it helps if they're perfect, but they don't need to be perfect to be a really effective leader in the organization. But what they do need to do is to be really good at a small number of things. So I think that this, if I were to kind of offer any suggestion, it would be to people to, ask for feedback from the people around you. If there was one magical thing that they could do, it is to seek for feedback. And it's amazing what people will tell you if you, in sincerity, ask them. And if you ask them, what one thing could I have done to make that presentation better? Don't make it complicated. Don't make it, don't assess me as an overall human being. Tell me one thing I could do to be more effective in our team meetings. One thing I could do to help this project move forward better. What I could have done to make this presentation, more compelling to you. But that willingness to ask for feedback, I think, can give you the most valid assessment next to a good 360, which is carefully designed to kind of try to give you an overall view from different dimensions, carefully constructed, anonymously produced, and done in a constructive way, not to give you negative information about all your warts and faults and failings, but to tell you what you really are good at and help you to kind of be better at them.
Sometimes it's important to keep it simple. And so I'm always a big fan of that approach, right? There are so many companies that are so obsessed with surveys and engagement scores and doing all this sort of stuff. Meanwhile, their leaders never go get coffee with their employees to just ask them like, hey, how am I doing? What can I do better? So I think that approach of just keep it simple, just get feedback from your people, from those around you. I think that's, to your point, one of the most effective and best approaches that we can take. Well, Jack, I really, really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to share your insights. We covered quite a lot. Anything that you want to mention for people before we wrap up on leadership for 2025? And then, of course, I'll ask you, where can people go to learn more about you, your firm? I know you guys put out lots of fascinating insights and research on a regular basis. I've referenced it many times, but anything you want to mention for people before we wrap up?
I don't have any other pearls of wisdom, and they can learn more about our organization by going to www.zengerfolkman.com. And we welcome them to come onto our site, and there's lots of download materials that are available on a variety of pretty interesting topics, we think.
Yeah, and I also recommend people follow you on LinkedIn, because I find that a lot of recent insights and stuff like that you put on LinkedIn too. Does your co-founder also use LinkedIn? Is he sharing his insights on there as well, or are you?
He does, absolutely. Yes, he does.
Okay,
Absolutely.
all right. So follow both of you guys on LinkedIn. And again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. My guest again, Dr. Jack Zenger. Make sure to check out Zenger Folkman. You'll find a lot of really cool insights and research from the work that they do. And I will see all of you next week. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.